So at age 45, I'm pretty comfortable with the fact that I'm not going to be the rock star that I dreamed about being when I was younger. Been teaching over 2 decades, and I know there are those numerous stories of teachers who become rock stars. Sting, that guy from Guided by Voices. And so I knew it's not really in my cards. That's okay. Because I've realized that as you get older, there's this weird thing that happens. I keep getting older, and my proximity to famous people in these rock bands gets closer. So I've had the opportunity to meet lots of my stars over the years. The trouble is, it just doesn't go well. Because similar to the fact that I'm not a rock star because I'm not really good at music, I'm not really good at talking to famous people either. Years ago, I have a friend who I found out is a close personal friend of the band REM. And REM was my band in high school. Don't argue. And so I'm at a small show here in Portland, somebody people have probably not heard of, and I'm there with my friend Randy. And we're listening to the music, and all of a sudden, Randy turns to me and he's like, "Oh, hey, Pat, I want you to meet somebody. Peter, this is my friend Patrick." And I turn, and it's Peter Buck from REM, possibly the greatest guitarist of my high school experience. And I stare at him and say, "Nothing." And he says, "Hi, Pat, it's nice to meet you." And I make sure not to say it out loud, but I think you just said my name. And because of that delay in thinking and then speaking, I said, "Very nice to meet you too, Mr. Buck." Actually, we've met before. Well, I was at a show, and you came and in the bathroom I was peeing, and you peed next to me. And it wasn't just me, it was my friend Brian. He was right here, and you came between us. And we looked around you, and we're like, "Oh, my God, that's Peter Buck." And you probably don't remember this, do you? No. Okay. And that was when I realized I got to work on this. Unfortunately, even more recently, last May I got to go to a music festival in Atlanta because a friend who's got a friend in a band. And so we got to have guest passes. And just a note, should any of us ever become friends, don't give me a guest pass. So we're hanging out backstage with all these people I'm admiring. At one point, I'm talking with the band Warpaint, and I don't know if people know Warpaint. They're awesome. You should check them out. 2 of them happen to be from Eugene, and I know this because I'm that guy who reads every article about every band. And so I get to talk to them, and I'm like, "I'm a huge fan, love your music. I'm from Eugene too." They're like, "No way, get out. Where'd you grow up?" And I tell them, and it turns out I'm like, "Yeah, you might not know this, but there's like a little house where one of the 20 marimba bands in Eugene used to practice, and I lived like right across the little valley." She was like, "That was Kudana's house. I was in the Kudana youth troupe." So we spend an hour talking about Kudana. It ends up with them offering me at one point. I'm like, "So when are you guys going to play in Portland again?" They're like, "Well, actually, we're playing this October. We're opening for Depeche Mode at the Moda Center." And they're like, "Here, phone comes out. Give us your digits, and we'll get you a ticket." At which point, what I should have said was, yes. Instead, what I said was, "Well, oh, no, we just met each other, and you don't even know me. I could be like one of those weird stalker people." At which point, I was one of those weird stalker people. So, moved on to the next band, happened to be the Shins, get to talk to James Mercer, the singer for the Shins, and I decided I'm going to play it a little cooler this time. So I wait for a good entry point, and the entry point I chose was a statement of his along the lines of, "I'm having trouble getting my 3 girls to eat healthy." And I said, "Funny, we had really good luck with our kids and their cruciferous family of vegetables." At which point he looks at me and, "The what?" "The cruciferous family of vegetables, cabbages, cauliflower, broccoli." "That's a real thing?" "Yeah, it is." So it actually went well. We ended up talking, and then later that evening, he pulls out his phone, and he's like, "Well, listen, man, give me your cell phone. We should hang out in Portland sometime." Again, to which I said, I was like, "Oh my God." But this time, I think it was good judgment. I flashed forward, and I pictured myself. I'd probably be texting James right now, like on stage talking about you. And so I said, "No good is going to come from me having your cell phone number. So put that away." And I'm pretty sure he's not going to feed his girls cruciferous vegetables. And the trouble with all this is I should have known all that, because throughout my life, I've had the benefit of sorts of having a personal barometer, a gauge of coolness. She's somebody, some of you might know her. She goes by the name Joan Baez. And I want to be very clear here. Should Ms. Baez catch wind of this story and potentially sue me for libel, she likely has no idea who I am, but she has been a constant figure throughout my life because of a story that I believe is that my dad's cousin was her childhood good friend and at one point manager. So all my life we've been growing up going to Joan Baez concerts totally free and getting to meet her regularly. And pretty much all those times I've been screwing it up. My first vivid memory of it was at about age 7. My dad drove our family up here to Portland to Civic Auditorium to see Ms. Baez. What I remember of that night is that I had a really terrible velour sweater on, and I spent the entire night like not liking it, trying to get it off. Show's over, we go back into the green room, and I was kind of a weird kid at the time. So I decided, while my dad was meeting Ms. Baez and I didn't want to talk to strangers, I kind of just went behind the green room couch and huddled. And I heard my dad say something to the extent of, I'm Jeannie's cousin, thank you very much for the tickets, we love your music, it was a fantastic show. This is my wife, this is my daughter, and my name's Rick McCreery, thank you. And then I hear, oh, and that's my son over there. And then I hear a woman's voice with a noticeable vibrato say, hello, thank you for coming to my show. And I'm fairly certain I growled in response. And I am fairly certain, at age 7 even, I knew I screwed that up. So the next vivid memory, I'm a junior in high school, and at this point I need to break just for purposes of the story so it doesn't get confusing. By this time in my life, a much more important Joan had entered my life, my stepmother, Joan. So from now on, there will be 2 Joans referred to in the story. But I'm a junior in high school. Joan Baez is coming to Eugene. We're going to go see her at the Holt Center. So my dad, my stepmother, myself, and my sister, along with my sister's roommates, all of whom are freshmen, women's studies majors at the U of O, emerging feminists, and absolutely gushing with enthusiasm, those sort of pre-tears. Imagine those Beatles fans at the Ed Sullivan Show, like crying. They're doing that in advance of the Joan Baez show. And I'm thinking, uncool. Artists don't like this. I know what artists like. So I decide I'm going to be the cool one at this show. So we go to the concert. It's wonderful again. By this point, I have learned Joan Baez's significance. I've taken U.S. history. In fact, in one class, I see a picture of her at the Civil Rights March, and I'm like, I know her. And my class doesn't believe me, of course. So I get it. Like, she's cool, and I'm going to play this one cool. So she comes backstage and greets us, and we all say, fantastic show, thank you. This time there's something new, though. She has a stack of little glossy photographs and a Sharpie. And she starts down with Emerging Feminist #1 and says, can I sign a picture for you to take away from the concert? Tears explode, hugs, and I'm thinking, not cool. That's not how you do it. She works her way down the line. All of us are getting a picture. She gets to me, and I've now written a story in my head that poor Joan Baez, she has to do this at every show. It must be exhausting. I'm going to be the guy who lets the rock star off the hook. So she gets to me, and she says, would you like a picture to take away from the concert? To which I say, that's okay. You don't have to do that. And her response is, well, maybe somebody will appreciate it someday. Yeah, no, go Joan. Go Pat. All right, screwed that one up too. So the next clear memory is now 4 years later. I'm a junior in college. Something fundamentally different has happened in my life in that I have a girlfriend. It took me about that long. And I decide Joan Baez is coming back to Oregon. She's going to play the Brit Festival down in Jacksonville. And I think, Dad, I want to impress this girl. I think Tara's pretty special. Is there any way you could talk to Jeannie and get us tickets to this show? And he's like, yeah, but you kind of screw it up at all these concerts. So you should, the risks seem high. I was like, no, I think I can do it. So I'm like, hey, Tara, do you like Joan Baez? And okay. I'm like, well, we're going to go down and not only get to see her, but we're going to get to meet her. What do you think about that? She was like, great. So she's game. So we go down to Jacksonville. We're backstage after the show. This time it's a little different. In the green room, there's a type of fan that I haven't seen before. Right before us in the receiving line is a guy who's got, like, he's carrying more LPs than he can possibly handle. And he's telling us, he's like, this one I sent away for in Japan, you can only get it at certain times a year or certain seasons, and she doesn't even know it's released. This one I got, it's a bootleg of this concert she did. This is sort of the Uber fan of Joan Baez, and I automatically feel like I'm out of my league. So I say to Tara, it's like, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna let this guy go first, and then we're gonna kind of hang back and play cool, and I'm just gonna say, hey, thank you very much for the show, I appreciate it. So this guy's talking to Joan Baez, he's talking her ear off, and I decide to kind of look at the table behind me, and I realize there's a buffet spread right there. And we're in the green room, and I'm kind of hungry, so I just start eating, and I'm like, oh, stale pita, awesome. And all of a sudden I feel a little tug, and it's Tara kind of indicating it's our turn, and I turn around with a full mouth of food. I say, hi, Ms. Baez, thank you very much. We got free tickets, because I've never paid for a ticket for your show. Ever. And thank you. My cousin's Jeannie. And she, again, just kind of looks at me, and I look at Tara, I'm like, right? And Tara's just kind of like, oh, God. Good news is she married me, so that all worked out okay. Tara, not Joan. So I decide right then and there, I was like, I can't even do it when the stakes are so high that I'm trying to impress somebody. I give up. I quit. And in the interim, there have been countless more Joan sightings, as I call them. And I've just decided to play it cool. Every time I kind of went in with the shtick. She doesn't know who I am, so I'm going to pretend like it's the first time. Thank you for the show. It was fantastic music. And that's it. And I've got a very clear cutoff. And it has worked. But then a few years ago, 2011, my father passed away after struggling with cancer. And the side of his family through whom we know Joan Baez came up to visit for his memorial service, and it was wonderful, and we got to reconnect with old family. A couple years after that, their father, my great-uncle Jim, passed away at age 98. And my stepmother Joan and I got invited down to the service. And so we decided to go, and I'm thinking this is going to be a nice opportunity to connect with my extended family. It's going to be some great time, a great weekend to spend with my stepmom, just the two of us, get to know each other. And who knows, maybe I'll see Joan Baez. So we go down, we go to the church. It's a very small church where the service is going to be in Mountain View, California. And Joan and I are there a little early. We're kind of like that. And we say we're with the family, and they say, okay, well, you've been asked to wait in a room right over here. So we go into the room, I open the door, and it's empty except for one person. At which point, I get that cold dread feeling and just think, Joan, stepmom, please. And I decide just to go in and say hello, then make a beeline for the coffee, and I'm going to let the Joans talk it out. And they do, and they're great. To my stepmom's credit, she is wonderful with Ms. Baez. She's like, we've been seeing your shows for a long time. I believe, actually, she knows my stepmom Joan has met Joan Baez's mother. Like, they're having the kinds of conversations people do when they don't overthink it. And I decide to just watch and learn. And then we move into the ceremony, the memorial service. And the family's instructed to sit near the front, and so we do, and I'm in the second row of the pew. I sit down, and then I feel somebody sit down next to me. My stepmom's over here, and right here is Joan Baez. And I just think, don't. Don't say anything. So I don't, and it goes beautifully. She gets up mid-service, she sings Amazing Grace a cappella. It was amazing. She comes back and sits down, and that's the end of the service. And then we go to the reception afterwards. And at this point, something has started boiling in me. And I think, I can't lose this opportunity. I have to talk to her. But I realize it's not about me. It's not about being cool. What it was is that a couple of days prior, I was on a run, and a Joan Baez song popped on my iPod, because who doesn't run to Joan Baez? And I was hit by that reaction that happens when you can't predict sadness. I suddenly started crying. I missed my dad. It wasn't about Joan Baez. It was about the story with how I know her. And I wanted to let her know that. So as I saw that she was getting ready to go, as we're all enjoying our little cups of ice cream at the retirement center, I decide to make a beeline for her. And I just go up and kind of awkwardly say, Ms. Baez, I'm really sorry to interrupt you as it looks like you're leaving, but may I share a couple words with you? And she says, sure, that'd be fine. I said, I need to let you know that you have been a part of my life since I was a young child in ways that you can't even imagine. And most of them have been very embarrassing for me. And she just kind of smiled, like, I don't know how to respond to that. And I said, and recently, in the last few years, I've lost my father. He was a very important person to me, but you were also a very important person to him. And I want you to know that you've given me a gift. Every time I hear your music, I'm given wonderful memories of my father. And it occurred to me that as a musician, you might enjoy hearing that. At which point, she smiled, and she said, thank you for that wonderful compliment, and came in for a hug, my first ever Joan Baez hug, and said, thank you. I bet your dad was a good man. And I said, thank you. And then I think I whispered, nailed it.